Hello, and welcome back to the Paper Soprano podcast. My name is Heidi, and I am your illustrious host. And today we have a very special episode. You all are in for a major treat because almost in tears laughing next to me is my dad. And we have a very special episode planned and not planned for you. So I just told him about how we do the episode here and how the podcast works, and he's still very confused. So so we shall see. But another special tidbit, today is actually his birthday. So it's a birthday pod and also a dad pod. So, okay, I'm going to hand the mic over. Oh, the other thing I have to note is that we are sharing a microphone because I am a little bit trashy and I only have one mic, and that's just how it is. So if you hear some scratching and rustling in between us speaking, it's because I'm passing the mic over, or it might be one of the dogs walking around, either or. So, okay, Dad. Who are you? Explain yourself to the people. What's your deal? What's your story?
My story. Okay, well, thank you for having me. Well, I'll start off with just saying that today's my birthday. And I expected a lot of gifts, and I've received them, and so I'm very pleased. I got some new rock glass sets that you gave me, which is nice, and an ice ball maker that Erica gave me, so we're going to put those into motion a little bit. What's my deal? Well, birthday, so 58 years of life. Nice. And between the time I left, let's see, where were we when I first got started? From Buffalo, New York, out to now Hamburg, New York, living in the town of Hamburg. And just getting ready for the whole Christmas season. Right. And it's been a very hectic and exciting time. Christmas is my favorite time of year.
Right. All right. That's good. Christmas is your favorite time of year? I didn't, not to say I didn't know that, but okay. Yeah, Christmas is good. Christmas this year is not as good because it's kind of a little bit lame right now. But okay, so going back to more about who you are, though, where did you go to school? Like, talk us through your educational journey, as it be.
Well, everybody starts off at the old elementary level and makes their way through high school if they're lucky. I was lucky to make my way through there, and went to college and ended up with studied emergency services for a long time, became a paramedic, and that was fun, and moved into management, and felt that urge to do things that, find a career that helps people, and that's kind of where I am. So moved into management and got an MBA, and then started my own business.
So when you say you went to college, a lot of kids going to college these days are in their 20s, or they're, fresh out of high school or undergrad. Your experience in your master's degree was different, right?
Yeah, I went to college right after I graduated from high school, but it was for more of an engineering thing, and then took a couple electives, decided that I was going to switch to emergency services, so I did that. And then I was done with college for a long time, but then my employer told me that I need to go back to school, so I did that. And that was right around the time when you guys were all born and little. So I went back to school in my late 30s, and then finished my bachelor's degree and then my master's.
And was it uniquely challenging in a way because I have a lot of friends who are, not my age who are in school right now with me, and we're in our program together, either master's or doctorate at Stony Brook, and some of them are in their 30s, some of them are well into their 50s, some of them are 20. It's different. So at your age, when you did your master's, what were the unique challenges you faced?
Well, when I started doing that, I was working full time, 2 positions, and then, of course, we had a family, so there were kids to take care of, and things to do that had to be done, house-wise and things like that. So we had life. So life was going on, and so you had to kind of coordinate your educational parts of life around those priorities. So
yeah, for sure. That's something that a lot of people don't take into account. Like a lot of people are my age specifically. There's a lot going on in everybody's lives individually, but I think there's a lot also going on in if you have small children while you're also in school, that's just multiple layers of difficulty. And also, I would like to just comment, if you hear a lot of like clickety-clackety noises, it's our dog Gunner walking around. And that's actually a perfect segue, because something that I think is interesting, tell our audience about our 2 dogs here. Give them their personality profiles of our 2 animals.
Well, Gunner is the yellow lab. He's the oldest. I think he's 5 now. And we actually picked him up today 5 years ago. He was a surprise. And if you remember, there's actual video of you as you walked in the door, and I kind of opened up my jacket, and he was in there, and then you burst out in tears like a sobbing child. But so he's a lab. He's a gentle dog, very friendly, but he likes to eat, so that's a challenge for him. And then and Maverick is a German Shepherd, and he is 4 years old, and he has a dominant personality, as most German Shepherds do, but he's very obedient. They're both good. They listen, at least to me anyway. So they don't listen to your mother very much, but but they're good dogs, and we enjoy having them around here. So as they are pretty playful. At least when you come back home, they are. So.
Yeah, they are very playful, and for some reason, Gunnar feels the urge right now to just make laps around the house, when normally he would be laying, very stagnant, maybe in front of the fireplace, maybe somewhere warm, but he feels like he needs to walk around right now, so you're probably going to be hearing a lot of that. So if you're wondering what that sound is. So you got your master's, and that was in business, in management, right? And so now tell everybody listening about your business that you started, and a little bit about how you started it and what it looks like now.
So when as I was working for emergency services organization, we would respond to 911 calls, and many elderly people, they don't have the family support like, let's say, our family does. So when they need things, they would unfortunately have to call 911 to get people to come and help them with the tasks of daily living. So they would call 911, and we would arrive, and they would ask us if we could read their electric bill, wonder if it's going to get shut off. Could you contact my son? He lives somewhere and he hasn't called me. Or could you make me some breakfast? So, by doing that over and over again, I had the feeling that there was a niche type of industry that was underserved in the area. So I took the opportunity after graduating with my business degree, and I started a company that was more of like a companion company, and then knew that at some point we were going to need to be able to hire nurses and things like that. So that took a couple of years for that process to take place in New York State, but then the over a period of time, we were finally licensed, and so now we have a company. It's called Crane Home Care, and we service 8 counties of Western New York, including the second largest metropolitan area in New York State, which is Buffalo, New York, and then Rochester and Monroe County. And we basically have people that go into the homes of our clients and cater to their needs with respect to daily living. We have nurses that go out and help them create care plans, and we work with their insurance companies, and we are just there providing a good service for people that are either sick or injured or just elderly and don't have a good support system around them. So we become an extension of their family. So in a nutshell, that's really what we do.
Yeah, that's something that's really overlooked, I think, when people think about elderly care. Everyone immediately thinks of nursing homes. So at least whenever anybody asks me about what my parents do or what, if at any time the conversation comes up to nursing homes, I always bring it up that you provide a very unique type of care, and that's really something that honestly is, I think, very much overlooked by a lot of the younger generations that have either, put their parents in a nursing home or any kind of assisted living spaces. So, yeah, that's really interesting. And that's called Crane Home Care. I'll link it in the description when I post this podcast. So if you are interested or you know anybody in the area or you just are inquisitive about the whole process, I will link the any kind of information you might need. I'll link their page and their website and things like that. So, okay, so Dad, this is a music podcast, but we also are allowed to talk about anything that we want because I'm in charge. So, but music-wise, tell me about what's your relationship with music? How do you interact most with music?
Well, let's see. I would say music is a significant part of my life. It always has been. I like listening to different eras of music, so I'm not kind of plugged into any particular time frame. But I think if I do have certain types of music that I listen to, that I like to make sure that I have the proper equipment and things. I just bought myself a nice pair of wireless headphones, so I'm listening to music pretty much, well, not too much when I'm working, but when I have my downtime around the house, cutting grass and things like that, I like to listen to music.
What's your preferred genre? Like if you were going to turn on the radio right now, what genre of music would you put on?
That's kind of tough because I do like all different types of music. So, and I think that, we've always had music on in the house when you guys were growing up. And so, it's not far-fetched to think that it had something to do with, you enjoying the music. And then, whenever you guys get into a particular thing, like when you were doing Phantom of the Opera at the high school, we got into Phantom of the Opera. Prior to that, your mother and I went with Aunt Lynn and Uncle Rick, I think, to go see Phantom in Toronto, which was great. And then when we saw you do it at the high school, that was just fantastic too. So, so I like those types of things. I wouldn't have a problem I always thought of getting a membership at Shays or, someplace like that. I like to have a very different, eclectic, type of
palette.
Yeah, I just like different types of music, all different types.
So, for those of you who might not know, Shays is the main performing arts center in Buffalo, New York. And there's actually a pretty dense program of productions that goes through Shays. It depends on the season, but obviously they're not doing anything now. But Shays is pretty unique to Buffalo, and I think they had Wicked a couple years ago. I actually did a production there. It was a very unique production. It was a world premiere opera. It was called Shot, and it was about the assassination of President McKinley. So it was a very interesting show, and it was very modern. But you know, things are pretty happening at Shays, I would say. But your music taste specifically, if I had to assess it, I would say that you like 70s light rock. Is that true?
Well, I certainly do like that, right? But it's not. I wouldn't say that's my go-to, right? I like the 60s. I mean, I was born in the 60s, so I started listening. You know, Grandma liked listening to the Beatles all the time, so we would listen to the Beatles on a record player. And then the 70s, of course, and the 80s music, you know, that kind of changed. So, like, I like Southern rock, you know, so I'm a kind of a Southern rock kind of person. But then in the 80s, I've never been a fan of the 80s. I think it became, you know, kind of too techno for me. I like, you know, good sounding music. And, you know, can't deal with too much of the, you know, the reverb or whatever you guys call that stuff over there, or the synthesizers.
I'm not calling it anything, but it's funny that you said I don't like techno or techno sounding things. I like good music, which I think you meant to say I like acoustic instruments versus technological or synthesizers, or you like acoustic instruments, like you like acoustic guitars, or you like rock and roll sounds with a drum kit, a real live player, you know, or like a harmonica player, or like a, you know, it's a very different sound palette. I know what you mean. You don't like the pop 80s, but there are some I like the 80s. I'm not here to discriminate against the 80s in terms of music, but if I were to give a kind of assessment about my own, like, you referenced how, you know, we were always had music around the house when we were growing up, and that is totally true. I have a very specific memory of the stereo system that was on top of the TV in our childhood house, and it was like this big gray thing, and there was a big CD collection. So you and Mom had a nice CD collection, and specifically, I think I remember listening to the Beatles' Please Please Me album a lot. Meatloaf was a significant contender. Mm-hmm. There was also, like, I think Wipeout or whatever that was from. It might have been from a Luau Hits or something like that. And yeah, I remember also listening to very, very frequently, almost every single week from my own memory here, is Saturday Night Fever. We would listen all the time, and we would sit in the living room, and just, that would be like the event of the evening, was listening to Saturday Night Fever. Can you explain what that is?
So obviously the 70s was a time I grew up. You know, I was, you know, going into my teenage years there. And disco was big then. And there, you know, your mother and I like going to what I still believe is the case, is the largest disco in the country. I think it is downtown Buffalo. They have the world's largest disco, and it is packed with thousands of people. They bring in bands like Casey, the original, you know, bands, Casey and the Sunshine Band and those types of things. And, you know, we had a lot of friends and family that liked listening to it too. So, it's good music. Like I said, I have such a wide array of, you know, music listening that, you know, it goes all the way from 60s music. There's a lot of songs I don't listen to in the 60s, but there's plenty of songs I listen to in every decade. So one particular music genre that I've never really been able to wrap my arms around is country and Western. I've never really been, although I can't say that. I mean, it's just really because there's a lot of songs that are just, when your grandfather, he made us listen to country and Western all the time. And it was that, somebody was dying, they were kicking their dog type of thing. And it was just bad music. But there are some country songs that I like, but it's never been something that I just gravitate to. There's always something better.
Well, you and I have that in common. I think I've talked about this on the podcast at least once, but I try to also be open to multiple genres, and as a music major and someone who's devoting my life to music, I do have specific songs in that you would classify as country songs that I enjoy, or they were in like the early 2000s kind of country songs, or in like the late 90s like Shania Twain, I don't mind, and that kind of genre. But nowadays, I feel like country has become this very manufactured, predictable pop, just hodgepodge of the same 6 topics that you can always expect to hear in a country song, with beers and trucks and mud and I got my girl and we're going to get some beers and we're gonna take our truck and drive it in the mud, and then that's gonna be our day because I love to live on the farm. But the thing about it that I don't like, that would be totally fine. But so many of these pop stars are just big commercialized people who monopolize on the whole idea of country music. They're not living on a farm. They're not actually doing these things. They're millionaires, and they're just making these stories, and it's like, I get it, totally got it, but it seems very contrived to me, which is why I don't really like it. And trust me, I like a good story song. I like the Beatles. They have a very fantastic kind of, there's a lot of fantasy or stories or kind of strange things you might say in their songs, but I buy it in a way. I buy it more than I buy country, which is I think why I don't really like country, because I don't really relate,
And if we did raise you on a farm, you probably would have a different opinion about that. But I am just kidding a little bit, because I just say that all the time because I know that Erica and Mom like country, and so does Jess. So, but there are a lot of country songs that I like. I think really, if I had to revise my previous statement, it would be, any song where, maybe rap. I can't understand rap. And, if I can't understand what you're saying, or you're just dropping F-bombs all the time, and that's not for me. So, so I would say that has to take, the number one position there, and country would be, it's not the type of country that Grandpa used to listen to,
Right, because that's more, the country that Papa Schneider used to listen to was more of like bluegrass, actually, and the style has evolved quite a bit. He was listening to, something that was similar to the blues in a way, not as similar to pop music, whereas now country has evolved in a way that's very similar to the pop recipe, and it has, in previous years, been more associated with bluegrass and the blues itself. And there would be solo instruments, or someone would take a verse and lay down their blues, and they would cry a river over it, and that would be a lot of probably what you were hearing when Papa Schneider was listening to the blues or to country blues. And yeah, it's interesting how the genre has transformed, but but the Beatles specifically, I want to talk to you about, because for me, I feel like that is really, I put the Beatles, like when someone asks me what's my favorite band, I immediately just discount the Beatles as being, okay, well, the Beatles are the greatest band of all time, so I'm just going to put them on another level. They're not really able, you can't really compare certain bands to the Beatles. It's just not fair, because they have such a huge discography. They spanned through generations. They're unbelievably, vast in their genre. So it's like they're just on another level. And I've had some friends who tell me that they don't like the Beatles, and I was like, all right, well, I'm sorry. I don't know if we can be friends. So if you're listening to this podcast and you don't like the Beatles, don't take that the wrong way, but we also might not be able to be friends. Tell me, okay, Dad, I don't know if you bought me this or if Mom did, but the very first piece of musical, I guess, repertoire that I received as a kid was this Beatles easy guitar book, and I feel like that was the biggest I guess piece of musical literature that I learned from, like teaching myself when I took guitar lessons for a little bit, but that Beatles book really shaped me as like a 10-year-old or something. And we had listened to so many of the Beatles songs, and we didn't have a lot of internet access, so I didn't really know all of the ones in the book. I couldn't just like go and look it up on the computer or something. I could have, but that wasn't really a thing to do that back in 2005. You're not going to go look up a song on the internet and learn it. I had to like learn how to play these Beatles songs, and I learned a lot by ear through like you playing them on the stereo, or like Uncle Joe playing them, and he taught me some guitar stuff too. But talk about your experience with the Beatles as a specific group.
Well, that, like I said earlier, that was one of the records that Grandma had, and she would play all the time. And so that was, any of those Beatles songs were available for us to listen to. And, so as I was growing up and, got my first car, and back then, a lot of the cars just had a radio, AM radio, and then FM a little bit. But then we had 8-track tapes. So I had a couple of 8-track Beatles tapes, and then we went to cassette, and we had the cassette tapes. And, so started listening to those types of things. Had a lot of albums growing up. But, the Beatles, the early stuff was, I kind of cut my teeth on them a little bit, because that was the environment in the house. So I didn't have a problem with it. And considering that your grandfather was playing all this hee-haw music for a long time, it was easy to latch onto the Beatles. But I liked the Beatles. I liked their story. Their music was easy to listen to. A lot of the songs were very basic. It was, just good sounds. I could understand the words, which is an issue for me. I mean, like I said, I can't really wrap my head around or get tied into any group where I can't understand what they're saying. So the Beatles were, it kind of filled all those categories, and I wasn't, I liked them, but like I said, at the time, a lot of that 70s music was coming out. You mentioned like 70s easy listening music, like light music, Elton John stuff, and there were so many groups back then, rock groups too. So 70s rock were the bands I started to gravitate to. So I kind of started off with the Beatles, and then kind of evolved into which the genre that I was really big into was like Southern rock. Any of those bands during that time frame, were just ZZ Top, 38 Special, any of those types of groups were things that I would listen to on a regular basis. But, we also listened to Elvis and things like that. Then as we started to move through into the 80s, well, then you heard groups like Journey and, Boston and all these other types of things. But they were all good in their own way. And I kind of took a little bit of each, era and each group, and I kind of made my own little mishmash of what I like to listen to. But I wasn't like hammered tight into one particular area,
And since you mentioned kind of like late 70s, I think, or early 80s, and continuously throughout throughout the genre there. We've got some dog drinking water action happening right now. Hope you can hear it. And also some licking of paws, I think, over here. So double duty. But so I wanted to put you on the spot a little bit here and ask you, what do you think about prog rock? Because what I would consider prog rock would be like Yes or like Meatloaf or groups of that similar genre. They really pushed the boundaries of those things that you like a lot. You know, they made longer songs. They were more involved. They had bigger, they had long sections, and then they would change sections. So it was almost more in depth of the kind of music, because it was still 70s kind of style, or 70s 80s kind of thing. But what's your impression of prog rock?
Well, I'd never heard the term until you just said it a couple seconds ago.
Well, what I mean, I guess it's short for progressive rock, prog rock. It's like from England. A lot of English bands were big on it. Prog rock. Is this not a term? If this isn't a term, I'm going to be really upset, because I'm pretty sure it is. But like Yes and like Close to the Edge and things like that, like all those big elaborate songs that are like 15-minute long songs, they'd be like a whole side of a record or something. Like it would be ridiculously involved, and they'd have like big orchestrations, and it would be rock, like Meatloaf. Think about Meatloaf.
Well, all right. I mean, if you take the term away from it and just, cite some of the names of the groups. I mean, like I said, there aren't that many groups out there, that I would say that I like every song they play. I mean, if it's a good sounding song, I would listen to it. Now, as I started to develop my own taste for music, and my taste for music started to expand, and I got away from the bubblegum rock or whatever you wanted to call it. I just think that any of the groups that you were mentioning, they're all awesome. I would listen to, a lot of their songs over and over again. I have no problem with any of those, and I'm sure there's a ton that I'm not thinking of right now. But in general, there are, it goes. I think music goes in phases in your life. So, what transcends from generation to generation has always been music, in my opinion. So you can take generations and, connect them through music, which is good. I mean, I think. So it's easy to put easy listening music. And when you guys were kids, we would play this, fun dance type music in, living room. You would all bounce around, and I think that's where, whatever the songs sound good to a person, those are the ones they gravitate to. If you're a committed music person like you are, then you're going to study the songs, all different types of songs, where the average person wouldn't do that. We're just going to flip from channel to channel till we find a song that we like. But, long songs, yeah, I mean, there are some songs that I would listen to that were, kind of long, but nothing crazy. Albums and things, there's just so many songs on an album, but I mean.
Right. So I actually just looked it up so that I wouldn't look like an idiot, because I've already been looking like an idiot on this podcast way too much. But so I am correct. I do know that it is shortened to prog rock sometimes. And I have the definition here on very trustworthy Wikipedia. So, but here's the definition. Progressive rock, often shortened to prog rock, is sometimes called art rock. And it's a broad genre of rock music that developed in the UK and the United States throughout the mid to late 1960s. Initially termed progressive pop, the style was an outgrowth of psychedelic bands who abandoned standard pop traditions in favor of extended instrumentation and compositional techniques that more frequently associate with jazz, folk, or classical music. Additional elements contributed to its progressive label, and lyrics were more poetic. Technology was harnessed for new sounds. Music approached the condition of art and the studio rather than the stage, and it became the focus of musical activity, which often it involved creating music for the listening rather than dancing. So I guess my question in asking if you like prog rock or not is, prog rock isn't necessarily like the kind of music that we would go out and dance to and see, and it's not easy to dance to because it's kind of music made for the sake of art versus music made for the consumption of the general public to like dance to. You know what I mean? So it kind of diverged in a way where you would just like listen to it and you'd have thoughts about it, or you would think about it and be like, wow, that was a weird sound they made, or that was an interesting piece of poetry that they just said, or they create a really intimate soundscape with all these bird sounds that they're using. Those kinds of things are very in depth in terms of music listening. Did you ever have any experiences where you were listening to music for the sake of like art music versus like dance music or music you'd casually listen to?
Art music, I'm not really sure. I do know that, again, I associate certain things. Music takes me back to a time of my life, right? So, and I also know what I thought was interesting too was that I watched a lot of movies when I was young, but I don't watch too many movies anymore. But a lot of the music that I started listening to, I learned about in some type of a movie. And sometimes it wasn't, many times it was an actual song and it got me interested in a particular group or band or whatever. But sometimes it was just music in general. Like, you think of like, like background music, like the orchestra music or whatever to a particular movie. Like, let's say Star Wars, like all of that, orchestra music in the background. I mean, it wasn't a song per se, but it was music that I really liked. I liked listening to it. And then that kind of takes you on your own path, and you decide as you start to listen to songs, what music sounds interesting to you. And, some people only listen to the hit songs on the radio. Others like to explore a little bit more. I'm really think of myself like a B-side guy, so.
Okay, so honestly, that's a really interesting point that you made, the point about film score and music within movies, because I guess what I'm getting at here with the prog rock question is that music can be created for a multitude of purposes, and sometimes it's for easy listening, sometimes it's for dancing, sometimes it's for religious music, sometimes it's for movies, sometimes it's, in this case, the interesting point that I'm getting at with the prog rock thing is it kind of was just created as like a statement, like an art piece almost, like something that wasn't necessarily made for anything else other than like sitting down and silence all cell phones in the studio. And that's what you're going to get with this podcast, you guys. We do not edit this. I'm not going to edit that out, mainly because I don't know how, but also because that's showbiz, baby. That's how it works. Sometimes a phone goes off in your performance and you just have to keep on going. So, but basically, I thought it was interesting that in the 60s and in the time in which you were very musically influenced, there was also a genre happening. It was in the UK, I think, primarily, but also came to the US later, where it was kind of just created for music's sake. Like, it wasn't really for anything specific other than just like an art piece. And there's a lot of that in the music that I study. We literally have songs called art song that are just, they're not with an opera. They're not associated with any kind of production. They might be within a set, like there might be like 4 or 5 pieces to a set. But basically composers, back in, when the classical era or the romantic era or whenever these pieces were written, Baroque, whatever, there's music just written for the sake of music. It's not written for any specific purpose other than here's a little tune, or here's a little ditty, and here's a little poem, and here's a little thing to make you think about something, or here's a little, story. So it's just interesting how music has really evolved, and your specific experience with music is very unique. Also, do you play any instruments, Dad? Have you played any instruments in your life?
I used to play the drums when I was little, but that was more of exploration than anything else. I was never serious with that. But I think that what's interesting now with music for me personally is the technology that I have available to me really lets me, expand to different songs. Like, for example, having Pandora as an app, right? So you listen to one song, you give it a thumbs up, and it automatically starts sending you other types of songs that might be similar to that one that you would like. And I can't tell you how many dozens and dozens of songs that I start listening to now, or that I've clicked on as a favorite, that I just like listening to. I think they have a good sound or whatever. Like, for example, Dave Matthews Music. I've listened to some of his stuff, and some of the other artists around there. Neil Young comes from a long time ago, but kind of easy listening. It depends on the mood I'm in. If I'm just relaxing, I could listen to religious music. I could listen to nature music. I used to have these CDs that was a nature CD for each season of the year, and it was nothing but a lot of wind and thunderstorms or whatever it was, with some music in the background. It just depends on the mood I'm in. If we're going out and we're going to a dance party or whatever it is, disco thing, then of course there's a lot of songs during those times. I just like how different it can be for each individual person. And then, of course, like I said, we've always had, everybody in the house has had their own different type of music. And music is something that we've always embraced. As you know, Uncle Joe has a band, so we would go watch his band, listen to his band on a regular basis. He plays a lot of classical rock stuff, but I like live music. I think I like it when the artists are fumbling through a song and things like that. It's not something that's automated. I like the natural part of them playing a song. So as far as the prog thing, the progressive, if it came out and it sounded good to me, I listened to it. The bands that you mentioned, yep, I listened to a lot of songs that those bands had, and I thought it was great. And I think that as more technology was available for me, probably in recent years compared to anything else, where I could really concentrate on listening to music by myself, then and listening to music while I do work. That's a significant difference compared to how it used to be. Driving in my truck or something, I can just be quiet and play it any way I want. Or if I'm doing work, I put headphones on and I listen, and it's just been, I enjoy it. It's a big part of, my life.
You mentioned Uncle Joe's band, and for anybody listening who doesn't know who Uncle Joe is, that is my dad's brother, and he does have a band that plays locally here in Hamburg, New York, and around Buffalo as well. And their name is, I know, my dad's mouthing South City. Their name is South City. If you have any interest in looking them up or wanting to learn more, their name is South City. And they also, my uncle also has another offshoot of South City, and that is the name of those three individuals who play are what, Mom? What's the no? She's behind you. Major Thirds. Yes, I knew it was some kind of musical pun. So the Major Thirds is their trio band. So But you mentioned you really like to listen to them, and they have had a very, I think, honestly, significant impact on the musical culture in this area. It's a very small area, and they play a lot. But obviously not now, because it's COVID times. And we as musicians are suffering uniquely because, it's hard to perform. There's not any venues who are even really open, and when they are, you have to play outside, or, there's very restricted parameters that surround musicians right now. So you, as an audience member, as a uniquely informed audience member whose brother is the lead singer of a band, how has COVID affected you in your inability to really enjoy and listen to and dance around and be carefree at musical events? And like when we have the ability to do that again, what will be your thoughts?
Well, like I said, Mom and I like to go listening to live music. There are several bands out there that we like to listen to. Uncle Joe's is just one of them. But it was, another time to listen to music, but also get together with friends and family that, as I think about that, Uncle Joe started working he went to school at Villa Maria College for music, but he was doing a job in computers or something like that, putting computers together for a long time. And then, he developed his job, but he always had an ear for music. He also liked the Beatles a lot. So, when he had an opportunity, he got into a band. And, long story short, he's in the band that he is in now. But, they would play at least once a week, and we would go out and listen to them all the time. It was just the venue that changed. But what was interesting is that many of the friends I would consider very good friends right now came from, where we would all gather and got to know them because they were listening to the same groups that we were listening to. Uncle Joe's band was one of them. So now many of those people, like the Crawfords and the Stillmans and Steve and Tony and all those guys, those are good friends of ours and probably will be forever, all because music pulled us together. So it's sad because, certain parts of the country allow this stuff to still take place, but in our state, they don't. So we haven't been able to, get together as a group for a long time. And when they finally, let everybody get back together, then I'm sure it'll just be like old home days for everybody. There'll be a big rush of everybody who hasn't been out for, 9 months to finally jam every bar out there that's got some live music going. So it's, I think when it finally does come back, it'll be just like it was, except there'll be a lot more people trying to take advantage of it.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that a lot of the hope that musicians have, specifically, I guess, classical musicians and Broadway musicians, are what I'm thinking about right now. Obviously, the Met and Broadway have been closed for months, and they don't foresee an opening in, many, many months. So it's like so many musicians are out of work, and there's no way that they can really make up those, first of all, those expenses, but also the experience of doing that. So it's interesting to hear someone talk about the audience perspective. I've always hoped that people listening would be very excited and depraved in a selfish way. I hope that everybody feels like when it starts coming back, that there's going to be a big demand, and that the arts will get they'll get injected with a lot of attention and a lot of just finances, coverage, media coverage, a lot of things that in general, in America, the arts are not as highly regarded as they are in Europe. There's a lot more funding in Europe for opera or things like that. And, while New York and New York City is one of like the biggest cultural hubs of the US, there's still we're still scrounging for money. And if you're if you're listening and you're also part of whatever email list the Met has, like they're asking you for money constantly, and they're asking for donations, and the whole arts foundation lies on donors, which is why I think it's pandering so much to an older generation. But that's a whole nother topic of discussion. It panders to a lot of older generations because they're the donors and they're the ones who put the money into it. So you have to kind of put on the shows that they want. You can't do a ton of experimental stuff because they're not going to come to your shows, and they don't, they want to hear Mozart, and they want to hear, Tchaikovsky and all of those beautiful things that the Met puts on and things like that. But the point I'm trying to make is that I hope that when things get back to normal, I hope it's a very big boom for the arts, and it can be a very rejoiceful time. Do you agree?
Yeah, and that's actually an excellent segue, because I don't know if I remember telling you this or not, but within the last month, I have started a foundation, which is called the Hamburg Fine Arts Foundation. And it literally has only just become a legal entity within the last 30 to 60 days. So we're in the process of setting up our executive board and, coming up with some of our things that, we're trying to accomplish, what our mission is and that type of thing. But, a lot of it was because what you said, I totally agree with that. I enjoy the arts. I enjoy helping, especially the kids that, were at the high school level that maybe didn't have the funding. Their parents maybe didn't have enough money to rent them a violin or something like that. Our foundation is going to be set up, and we are going to fundraise, and we're going to reach out to all those larger organizations that are, philanthropic as part of their mission as well, like giving back to their community, that enjoy giving money and want to see the arts developed. Like, let's say, for example, the high school that you went to, there's a foundation that helps out just for sports, right? But that was something that I always felt was like, it was a little bit unfair, because everybody wants to, give money to football teams and when, sports teams and things like that. But there aren't a lot out there for arts. And when I say arts, I'm talking, it is obviously music, of course, but it's also chorus, band, it's photography, it's painting, it's everything about the arts. And so when we raise money, part of our mission will be to donate dollars to those particular classes that or organizations. Doesn't have to be within the high school, could be anything within the Hamburg area that needs money to support their fine arts. And so that's going to be starting within probably the first quarter of the next year.
I had no idea that you were doing that. So this is the first I'm hearing of it. So this is my organic reaction, but that is great. I had no idea you were doing that. What the heck? Like, okay. I'm your arts enveloped daughter that might want to know about that kind of thing. That's great. I'm super excited to hear about that. And you have been on the school board for Hamburg. I know that you have been a big advocate for the arts, which is great in terms of just in general access to the arts for young people in high school or whatever. But that's really great. And I will mention that if anybody's interested in finding out more about that, you can contact me at a later date, because I guess it's still in a very early stage. But that's wonderful. Is that something that someone would be able to donate to? Like, what's the format?
Well, like I said, we're in the early stages. So the entity itself, the Hamburg Fine Arts Foundation, is a legal entity now in New York State. So the next steps were to, for me, being the person that, developed it, was to bring in a group of, senior directors, which I have already done. So we're in some early stages. We have, like I said, I think that within the next 4 months, we will take some light year steps, things that we're going to be able to do, which we can take donations. Of course, we'll take donations from anyone, and we have a lot of opportunity within the area, especially with all the connections that we have with the group of people that I have on our board, spreading the word right now. So I think we've just been going through the formality of setting up. It's actually a business, right? So a foundation. It's a non-for-profit. So we are here. Our basic mission is to raise funds and give those funds out to any of the fine arts. And really the sky is the limit when it comes to those types of things. So as we continue to develop our relationships with businesses in the area that also have similar ideas, that they have a need to donate money, they want money to stay in their community. Maybe the owners or the senior managers of those organizations want to donate money to the arts because whatever their personal connection is with it, maybe their kids were in it, like you were in it. That's how I got into the idea of it. So once it gets started, there'll be more information to follow, which I will, of course I will, give you information as it is necessary to give you. But that's where that, to bring this around full circle, what my desires are for music and that type of thing. It is my commitment now to give back to the community. So my businesses will give to this type of foundation and watch kids develop at a very early year, even if you're playing the what they call that plastic flute thing?
The recorder?
Oh yeah, the recorder. When you guys were all little, you played those things and you were interested in it, right? So so it was, and because I enjoy music, just because, and the arts, I received paint. I am on the school board for the Hamburg Central School System. I've been there for several years. I've always on the board for Medaille College, and so I like giving back in some way, shape, or form. Time or treasure, that type of thing. Whatever you have available to give, you should do, and I've always tried to do that. So now this is something personal for me because it was something that I actually set up. So, and Hamburg is our community, so I wanted to do that. And now it's done. So we're ready to, just take the next steps, make the next right steps, and we'll be, in full swing very shortly.
That's great. I had no idea that was happening, but now that I know, 10 out of 10. Great. So we're coming up on our 1 hour mark here. I'm going to ask you one more question and then we're going to wrap it up. And the question that I'm going to ask you is, there's a lot of collegiate students, a lot of my friends and my colleagues and peers who are listening right now. And even if you're not at your collegiate stages, you might benefit from some unsolicited advice. But if you had any advice to give to a collegiate age person who might be in their master's or their doctorate, what would you advise them to do that maybe you did or you didn't do, or you'd give them some piece of advice to move forward in their post undergrad endeavors?
That's a big change from what we were just talking about. So I would say that be honest with yourself. Make sure that before you go into these next career stages of your life or your next education stages of your life, that you do a lot of research on what it is that you're going to be studying. Because when you're done and you get that piece of paper, you're going to be expected to go out and be part of society and contribute. And so you should know what that job is already entailed back and forth. Nothing should be a surprise, including the salary that you're going to make, the types of jobs you're going to be able to get, and be able to understand too that if you have school loans out there, keep your school loans as low as possible. Try to work through your school. Keep your loans down, especially if you're going into a career where your pay starts out relatively low, because life gets in the way many times. And, keep a good, close network of your family and friends around you, and, work hard, study hard, but, make sure absolutely you know what it is that you're going into, and it needs to be for all the right reasons.
Very, very genuine advice there from someone who's been in the field many years. I would very much like to second that in any way that I can, in my own words, which is, do be honest with yourself, and those school loans, we all know they're looming around the corner. So I guess that's your takeaway from today. And also, we've got a lot of other things that we chatted about today, which is always great. I love a good chat about personal choices in music and what you like and what you don't like, and questions about specific things. And hopefully today you got to learn something a little bit about my dad on his birthday. So thanks, Dad, for being here. And if you wanna say your goodbyes, just give everybody a little send off here.
Yes, thank you for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to be with you all tonight, and go Bills.
Nice. Go Bills, of course. And if you did enjoy this podcast, or you do, please do show us some support and like this video, subscribe to the YouTube channel if you are listening on YouTube, and maybe tell somebody about this podcast. Maybe get some word of mouth, going on here. Thank you anyway for all of you who listen to the podcast, and I appreciate you all being here. It has been a dad cast to remember. Happy birthday, Dad. And this has been the Paper Soprano Podcast. Thank you all for listening. Bye-bye.